Muchas gracias. Es un gusto veros aquí. Creo que es muy importante, ¿no?, este ciclo de conferencias, aunque se encuadra dentro del máster habilitante. Algunos sí que sois del máster, algunas caras conocidas, pero muchos de vosotros sois de grados y bueno, creo que está muy bien que estéis aquí hoy y que os acostumbréis a aprovechar, ¿no?, las conferencias, los invitados que van pasando por la escuela, ¿no? Yo creo que esto es algo que la suerte que tenéis de tener una escuela como esta, que tiene una dimensión y que tiene tantas aulas, tantos profesores diferentes y los distintos invitados pues pueden complementar muchísimo la experiencia, ¿no?, diaria que tenéis en el aula, en la unidad docente y creo que está muy bien. Por eso animaros a que sigáis siempre y podáis asistir a tantas conferencias como podáis. Eso es muy, muy importante. Hoy tenemos la suerte de tener con nosotros a KOSMOS, a Leonid. Muchas gracias por aceptar la invitación y pues creo que nos va a dar una visión no solo de su trabajo, que también supongo que hablarás de tu trabajo, de los proyectos que hacéis en la oficina, pero también es lo que quizá nos interesa, bueno, no nos interesa más, pero nos interesa mucho, ¿no? Y os debe interesar mucho, ¿no?, de qué estrategias, ¿no?, aplican, ¿no? No es tan importante ese trabajo que vais a ver, que lo podéis encontrar, podéis, pues está publicado, podéis incluso buscar y seguro que encontraréis en un sitio que se llama biblioteca planos y publicaciones donde se vean dibujos técnicos, ¿no?, de esos proyectos, pero creo que lo que puede ser diferencial y nos va a aportar mucho va a ser que nos explique por qué, ¿no?, por qué trabajan así, cómo trabajan, qué estrategias se emplean. Yo creo que eso es el punto. En el máster habilitante estamos continuamente hablando de ello y en grado pues es también muy interesante que entendáis, ¿no?, el porqué de las cosas y cómo esas estrategias pasan de proyectos a proyectos, cómo aplican, bueno, de alguna forma su modo de entender el mundo, su modo de ver y de responder a las cuestiones que aparecen a diario en el estudio. Gracias, Leonid, es un placer tenerte aquí. Le doy la palabra ahora a la profesora Begoña de Abajo que va a hacer una pequeña introducción.
Bueno, voy a ser muy, muy breve porque ya José María la ha introducido más o menos. Te daría el micro y bueno, voy a hacer una presentación muy rápida y solo decir que supongo que todos le conocéis o conocéis la práctica de KOSMOS, así que no hace falta que le presente demasiado. Decir que nos parece que es un invitado muy especial y muy pertinente porque refleja bastante una condición, yo creo, contemporánea que os va a tocar vivir y es, por un lado, este perfil global o internacional que tiene su práctica. Son varios arquitectos trabajando en diferentes partes del mundo, atendiendo a problemas generales que de algún modo les permite lo virtual formar parte de un mismo estudio profesional. Y además también una condición creo que muy propia de hoy, que es que abordan proyectos de múltiples escalas, desde el diseño de objetos a la intervención de planeamiento urbano, pasando por la construcción de edificios de arquitectura realmente interesantes. Además de todo esto, compaginan su práctica profesional con una investigación y la construcción de instalaciones sumamente interesantes, que supongo que muchos habréis visto en redes o conoceréis, porque creo que en los últimos años han estado presentes en las bienales de arquitectura trienales, digamos, más conocidas. Así que estamos, yo creo que deseosos de conocer cómo son las tripas de vuestra práctica profesional de KOSMOS. Y sin más, por favor, un aplauso y una bienvenida a Leonid.
Hola a todos. Yo he preparado hoy esta charla en inglés, entonces voy a hablar en inglés, pero si luego tienes preguntas puedo responder en castellano. Es solo que el nivel de mi español es un poco básico. Hello everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm really happy and very proud to be in ETSAM. I have quite some familial connection to Spain, so I know the importance of this school and all the great job which is done here and all the great architects. So it's a big honor for me, and when I say for me, I'm speaking from the name of my colleagues and partners. We are around 15 people, depends on the fluctuates with the interns. But we are based in, despite the fact that I live in Zurich, in Switzerland, and my partner, he's based in Graz, in Austria. We are based in several cities around the world, and due to certain private constellations, that's how it always has been, and it seems that it will stay, and we are, at least for now, not trying to unite in one place. And the name of today's lecture is Permanently Temporary. And the first thing I would like to speak to you about today is a topic of our constant inspiration. It's temporary texture, what we call temporary texture. It's a kind of a term which we created by crossing out con and archi from contemporary architecture. Actually, it's a book which we will present in November, and we will also make like an event to launch it, so I will be happy to share it with you fully in less than 2 months. But basically, it speaks about the structures which inspired us from the beginning when we were still students. It's the temporary structures which exist in our cities, and sometimes their presence is much more permanent and much more present than of actual architecture. Here is, for instance, a photo of a New York intersection, and we can see that people probably mostly see only this structure, and that exists there for years, and the architecture is a bit on the background. And it was always, so this is the book which we're it's already released, and today I would like to show a couple of images for it to show also that at first it was just a simple inspiration. We were just students, we looked at the structures, we liked them, but the more we analyzed them, the more we understood they're actually, they're working very smartly, they're working smartly with the resources, they're built for disassembly, and therefore they're inherently ecological. They are really solving the problems of our cities, and they're doing it in a very quick and efficient manner. And they're having many things which actually permanent architecture is missing. And sometimes it facilitates the permanent architecture, but sometimes it's almost taken over and behaves much smarter than the so-called designed architecture. So here is just some snapshots, and what is actually ordinary can be really unique, like this image of Duomo, and it achieves maximum effect with minimum means. This is a very interesting typology in Switzerland, which marks the future building for the democratic process of voting for the future building. So these sticks, they're not just there, they're marking the future development. And it's not at all decorative, it's functional, because when we analyzed it, each color has a meaning. These colors, they are not done because the architects decided to do them this so-and-so, but they mark danger, or they are done because there's anti-inflammable liquid, and so on. They can seem wasteful, but they're inherently ecological, like this example in Switzerland, when they covered huge glaciers with a textile in order to protect it. And sometimes they're completely fake, but actually they're real, and sometimes these buildings, they substitute a big part of the city for quite some time. What looks hopeless is actually very powerful, like these structures which support monuments during the war in Ukraine. And also what's interesting is they're inherently vernacular, and that's also what we found out through looking at them, because no one would ship scaffoldings or these textiles from another country. No one would purposefully choose them. They are done from pragmatic reasons, and therefore they have a logic of vernacular architecture. And these kind of structures were also a source for us for inspiration. And the first projects, our first, won competition, and the first project built was a temporary museum. And we used the debris netting, the nets which you saw in many of these examples, this material which is very known probably to all of you, in order to make this temporary museum. And again, speaking about this temporary permanently, there was a museum already planned by OMA, by Ram Koolhaas in this place in Moscow, and they were not able to finish on time. So in order to open something, they decided to make a kind of a museum for one summer, which preceded the main one. So again, we saw, and it was our first lesson, how these temporary structures, they actually are quicker and maybe more efficient. And then, of course, all these can be disassembled and reused further when it's not anymore needed. And our first transformation was also, it was an old factory, then temporary it was a cultural hub, and then it became a future housing. And again, the temporary materials, such as this material, which you probably know, which is used for roofing or for insulation, was used in order to quickly transform this space into something very different and then to again be reused. But the first project which I would like to show in details is the one which the organizers chose for the cover. Therefore, I felt that I have to also start with it. It's Airbox Pavilion, and basically it was also officially, despite it's quite a kind of well-constructed building, it was supposed to be a temporary building for the World Championship of Football, which happened in Moscow in 2018. And they needed an infrastructure in the park for sportsmen, but not for the professional sportsmen, but to promote sports amongst children, amongst footballists, basketballists. So they made kind of a multifunctional playground. And we thought that it's a very short-lived event. And we started to think how to create an infrastructure for, not for sports, but actually for people that can later transform. And as you understood, we quite like this infrastructure architecture. We tried to learn from it. And back then we were living in Bangkok, and we saw this image of this beautiful abandoned Bangkok billboard, which kind of didn't carry at the moment any logo or any brand. And there was also this guy who was holding on something similar. And we thought, like, what if we create something like this, quite a neutral, simple, practical infrastructure, which can later serve to brands, which can serve to people, which can serve to different activities. And back then, this was a project for the football. It was Nike who promoted it, but you will see that in the end, the story was a bit different. So we proposed a structure which would locate it differently in the park and have different reasons. So basically, there was a main kind of billboard which was showing the entrance to the park. There was a canopy where the running club would get together. There was this space was oriented to the football field, and therefore it could have a score. And this was kind of a place where people could stretch and also go access the rooftop. And this was the project realized, and it was a very simple membrane made of metal, which also permitted not to kill the trees in the park and to kind of build around them. And it was a completely open structure, so even all the MEP technology, all the ventilation and so on, was purposefully exhibited outside, and as you see, kind of allowed both nature and people to coexist, despite of its quite industrial appearance. And it also created, due to this lattice, it created also this kind of shadows, which create another kind of layers of impact of this building. There was kind of an interior facade, there was a second facade, there was a shadow and this kind of lattice of shadows. And what was important for us also was to make what we call the naked building, so kind of a building which is completely visible from outside, completely sincere with how it actually functions. So here you can see the back of the lockers with the storage room and the room for all the electronics, which is visible. And what was also important is to show the connectivity of this building. So in plan, it was a very simple plan with a cross, with two crosses with two directions. So one would bring you to football, one would bring you to outdoor gym, to basketball, and to the running. And this was kind of there were two corridors like this, which would cross the building. And here you can see its location in the park, in the kind of it's serving just as a simple infrastructure for people to play outside. And the biggest, let's say, pragmatic reason which it had was the only closed and the only opaque space was the lockers with the showers, and then the main hall where people were doing sports. But actually, and this was already one of the first moments during the event, that we saw that this sports hall, which was completely openable and transformable, and also had like lots of mirrors to kind of blend it with the park. It was used also for events, and that's how the building was built. And actually, after it was inaugurated, it started to live a second life. And again, speaking about temporary, despite the fact that it was made temporary, it had a very low foundation. It was designed to be later disassembled. 6 years later, I mean, actually, thanks to the fact that you put it on the cover, I I went back to it and looked what's going on. 6 years later, it's still on. It changed completely the reason many times. So there was everything from carving of the pumpkin to some textile workshops to some book presentations and so on. And the logo of Nike went away, the sports function went away, and sometimes it's even kind of decorated for city festivals with some random decorations. So that was the story of a little, let's say, temporary thing which stayed for quite a long time. And another, I will start with a series of pavilions in this lecture. And another pavilion which actually was very temporary is called Off-Season Pavilion, and this is probably closer to you. It was done for Logroño Concentrico Festival. Maybe you know it. It's a very nice festival of art, city, and architecture. And basically it happens in the province of La Rioja, which has this image of the winery, a bit cliché. And for us, when we went there, the main question was how to reveal the hidden resources behind this a bit postcard wine production. Like everyone knows Rioja, and it sells this image, and everyone knows also Rioja from Calle Laurel, from these old historical barrels, from having tapas with wine. But actually the production is wine and a bit like the back of the house of this process, which actually moves the industry and helps the people, interested us much more. And actually we went to several bodegas, and I was there in January, so you can imagine it was out of the, let's say that's why it's called also off-season pavilion. It was out of the season, and there was not many people. It was the day like today, even more cold with gray sky, not many people. But we saw that there is huge amount of this material, which is called jaulones de vino, which are cages, huge 1 by 1 meter cages of wine. And here you can see them fully functioning, so each one contains hundreds of bottles. But when I came and took some pictures from behind of the fence, we saw that actually, and this is a little photo, but actually thousands of them are standing idle during almost half a year. And the task is, if you know Concentrico, was to create a city pavilion almost without any function. So basically, we're always thinking about the resources when we start working. And the idea of wasting some resources just for 1 week was, of course, not very dear to us. So we thought that maybe we can work with this. And we worked with the local producers, Same, who were like really metal producers who were only doing these cages in massive amounts. And it appeared that these elements, they can be constructed in quite high structures, and they can be dismantled also without any further impact. So again, trying to counterpoint the permanent and the temporary, we placed it next to the one of the city big cathedrals on the esplanade, and created a little kind of basilica-like pavilion from these jaulones, which also served the same reasons as the church, but just for a very small, with a much more modest ambition, and for a very small period of time. So it was a very simple section, very simple plan, like a simple basilica with a very repetitive structure. And then we just installed them there with the producers. So we didn't even need a construction company to do this, because it was a super elementary process. And then the main thing was that it would give a shadow and a place to gather. So actually it was like a very big lattice to give shadow, but it also became a place for temporary gatherings during the festival. And when we found this material, we kind of believed in it completely, and we saw that it has it's very beautiful, again, like these pragmatic solutions, they are very beautiful, inherently beautiful, and you just need to kind of reveal this beauty and see it. And not only it was a very intricate interior, which even if we tried to design something like this, we probably wouldn't manage in such a short time. It also had a very strong material presence, which was also, the producers told us that it was just because of the anodizing of the steel that it has these beautiful color changes. And like sometimes you see them green, sometimes you see them yellow, sometimes pink. And this was not at all, we could not predict it. And yeah, so this was later, after a series of events, was going back to serving, to store the wine, and this kind of pavilion left zero presence, which is also very important for us, because we think that that's how we should think as architects, that even if you build a very big building, the impact of it can stay forever. And what is this impact? And then another project in Spain, which is speaking about similar topic, about the resources, is called Permanently Temporary, and it's the same name as this lecture, and it was for us a bit like the point which we wanted to make. We were invited in Barcelona. You probably know this little city, far away. And actually, no, it was a kind of a Madrid-Barcelona joke to wake you up. Yes, this little village. But okay, coming back to Barcelona, basically, it was a festival. It was called Model Festival of Barcelona. And our idea was to reveal the hidden resources of the city. So this was a bit a symbolical project for us to speak about the topic of resources in time. And actually we thought, how can we show the potential of a city as a resource? Because you can imagine how much resources are there constantly in the city. And we have made the tour through all the periphery of Barcelona, and we have seen many of these storages of enormous amount of materials. For instance, here you can see 2,000 jerseys just idling on a huge square without any necessity. There were some random materials, there were materials for protection, there were tons of asphalt not used, there was some material which was completely new, and this is just standing somewhere in huge amounts. There was a huge tunnel which was made with a defect, and therefore Soriguia, the company, had thousands of these panels stored, and they didn't know what to do with them. There were the water things, but the most probably amazing moment was when the city of Barcelona invited us to these treasuries of the historical monuments, and then we were really like in the cave of treasures, and there were hundreds and thousands of old sculptures, sometimes slightly broken, sometimes not even, which didn't serve any purpose, and we chose this, Minerva, to help us to build the pavilion. There were also incredible spaces like this. We called it the Trash Guggenheim because it looks like the Solomon Guggenheim Museum in New York, but it actually was just to store some old windows and some old panels. There were Gaudi doors. There were pieces of Enrique Miraya's the Tir de Arcos, which is standing there forever, and so on and so forth. So then we made the selection of these elements and kind of create a catalog of them and try to focus on only the elements which are very, very, let's say, they have an image of their material is very permanent, they are very mineral, very heavy, in order to show that, and that was the point, in order to show that they exist and even them can serve a very permanent role, but to show the resource. And then we united them in the park, quite in the center of Barcelona, in a certain composition to create several spaces, and then used the material which you already have seen, this debris netting, to cover it and to create a space which served as a lantern in the night, which was kind of a gate to the park in the morning, which was a space together. It had also exhibitions about these spaces which we visited. It was kind of given the knowledge about the city sources, and also a place for parties in the evening. And what was important for us is that, and this is what this kind of sculpture was showing, that we were using these elements without, let's say, sentimental or historical reference to them, but really as a resource. And this sculpture symbolizes them, despite we, of course, respect the author of this sculpture, but the fact that it served just as a column was more important than if it was standing there in the center, whereas the water cages, which are usually used for, I don't know, producing water and giving water in construction sites, they were used as a central element and as the light. And also we tried to underline this, let's say, the contradiction, but the coexistence between very permanent and very temporary in this project, and we created kind of always an outline of the, let's say, the most sturdy mineral materials which last for ages, with a very thin textile which would always hug it in a certain way and create this a bit of a contradiction. And there was also storage of the materials which we found in the city, which people theoretically could take in order and even bring and exchange. This never worked because they put a security guard who didn't let anyone touch it. But at least we managed to make like a workshop on the deconstruction, disassembly of materials with some of them, and the citizens, they made some kind of little furniture pieces with them. And and right next to it was a huge kind of another resource next to the pavilion showing this coexistence. And of course, similarly to the Logroño pavilion, it was fully disassembled and went back home. And the last out of these, let's say, kind of temporary projects, which I would like to show for today, I mean, the organizers said that it's not a short lecture, so I could have spoken shorter, but they said to speak quite long. So it was a project which we just finished, and it's a little project. It's a project of the students of mine, which was done in the studio where I teach in Het Genève, and there's actually some institutional friendship going on here. And it was a project which was done for an event of which is called, very boringly, it's called Europe's Day of Heritage. So even the name of it sounds a bit boring, and the event itself is not very exciting. So it's actually people go into some old buildings with very kind of bureaucratically organized excursions. And we thought that actually this event should be about the people, because people are also heritage of the city. And it was actually happening next to our school, so on this huge green field. And again, so it was the students, it was the previous semester which we have done. So maybe it's interesting also for you, coming from Polytechnical School, which I think is a very much high level of theory. The school where I teach is called High School in Switzerland, is much more kind of hand school, so people maybe don't take such big projects as in Polytechnical schools, but they usually try to do it with hands. And that's the distinction between the Polytechnical school and ours. And basically they were thinking what to do there, and it's all surrounded by quite important historical buildings that used to be old factories. And they decided that nothing is more simple than propose a city picnic around these buildings. And they really like the fact that this movement of putting an app for the picnic is a very simple and very not aggressive act to the surroundings. And then speaking again about the infrastructural materials and these temporary solutions, was quite an ingenious idea of this agricultural thick tent, which was used for this project, and was a simple blanket which also, with the help of a little points, transformed into little pavilions, which gave shadow and a bit like revealed the grass. All was done just for 2 days. It was last week that we disassembled it. The people from the neighborhood quite liked it. And another thing was that we had an old fountain, so it was a bit a scenographic and playful project. There was an old fountain which the students proposed to evacuate the water from there for quite some time and to transform it into a pétanque field, the game of throwing the balls, which is quite typical in the in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. And this was the second project. Again, they just put they reused some old office carpets, which they found. And kind of the last installation was this kind of ventilation pipe, which served as a fountain, temporary fountain. And one more little thing, because it was about these heritage days, so the students proposed, so this is a metaphor of one of the main buildings one of the main bridges in Geneva. So each of these flags was designed in order to commemorate the heritage of the city, like in a flag. But the point is that the students decided to choose, and they were mixing, for instance, this is a famous kebab place in Geneva, and this is a famous modernist building, and this is a church, and this is a building by Le Corbusier, and this is a skate park. So they tried to combine kebabs and cathedrals, skate parks, and Le Corbusier in order to show that heritage is not only what's written in the history books, right? And the last and funny moment was that we wanted, and the point was to show these historical buildings. For instance, this is a modernist building by Georges Ador, a very famous Swiss modernist. And the idea was to allow people to go there, but due to their rules, it was not allowed to go there. So they we have put a kind of a pavilion, like saying, serve yourself, come here. but it was then access interdit. So servez-vous, access interdit, like serve yourself, no, you're not allowed, in order to show that actually some of the things could work just if the rules could be slightly less rigid. And here I would like to come to the second part of the presentation, and to speak not about the pavilion-like structures, but about the transformations of a more, let's say, serious building. So we believe, and with some time we understood, we as architects, that sometimes we should not be just building or thinking about how we build, but we should be, because architect means main builder in Greek. And that's why in the book we crossed out the word archi from texture, because all these buildings, they are built not by an architect. Usually they don't have like an author or a famous designer. So here we think that we can start thinking of transforming from chief builder to a chief curator of space and materials and time. And what I mean by this is that any building, even if it's a very permanent building, is in a way as kind of a temporary moment of materials and time, because materials come, then they're exchanged. But also we can imagine that any building can also be a different space and time. And I think that the more and more we work on this topic, we believe that this is how we should even start designing buildings, and never think about them only in this one single programmatic way. And so the first project I wanted to show is the first in this second part, is the Stadthotel Trimle. It's a renovation of, it was a competition which we won. In the periphery of Zurich, there are 3 skyscrapers in a Swiss standard, just high buildings, made in the 1960s, and they used to be the places for residents for a hospital, but now they are not in use and they don't know what to do with them. And the city wanted to demolish them, and then a collective from Zurich proposed to make a competition in order to save these towers, because they really believe that this is a valuable resource and it would be a shame to demolish them. Then the problem was that we were transforming the buildings which kind of failed to perform. And the first question, we started to think how to create the buildings which last for ages, because it's obviously that we have to build for ages and not just temporary solutions, but that they don't have a problem that in 30 years you have to demolish them and they are not functioning again. So we looked at the structure of this building, with some historical photos of how it was constructed, again trying to understand the materials and the space. And we came up with an idea which we called hardware and software. And basically it was, Habraken already spoke about it also in the 60s when he spoke about transformable buildings. And we decided to kind of to conceptualize and to say that buildings have, actually it has much more layers, but in a simple way we can divide that there are 2 layers. One is kind of a permanent structure for ages, like bones of the building, and the second is this temporary architecture, which could be with a smaller span of time, which is the facilitator of change. So in order, you don't need to demolish the whole building, but you can change these temporary elements for programmatic, climatic, financial, different reasons. And we start to analyze, so for instance, here in this diagram, the concrete would be the hardware, and all the, let's say, more colorful things which protect us from the sun, which divide the space, which provide excess energy, they can be called software. And then in order to, again, to make a point with this competition, there were 3 towers, and we proposed to have 3 strategies for them. One would be a strategy which the city would need years to transform this building. Another one they could have done in months. These are German words for years, months, and the last one in days. So in days, that means you can almost immediately start to occupy. And we have created, let's say, instrumentarium for this, and for the days that would be, let's say, furniture and very simple temporary structures. For months, it would be something like scaffolding structures, and for years, it would already require serious transformations of these buildings so that it could function. And the first pass would be to work with an existing plan. I don't know if the same language is used in Spain. So yellow in Switzerland means demolition, and red means new construction. I don't know if it's used here as well, but just so basically that means that we create kind of a series of equal rooms with no hierarchy, and make it kind of a perfect hardware. And then the thing is that these spaces could already be occupied and transformed within the days. So this was the proposal for the first tower, and that it's kind of a temporary use. The second, and this would be the facade of it, the second, the Mans Tower, would require an addition of perimetral, vertical and horizontal circulation in order to allow the spaces which were very small for the current standards to function separately and to create a series of apartments in this building. And then they would be transformed into a series of either apartments or offices, and that would require this horizontal circulation. And the last one would be working already with the slabs and creating a series of double height spaces, which will allow already for spaces with lots of people, with multiple processes, and this would already require years and more serious transformations. And it was a very political project, and many projects were proposed, and unfortunately the project is not going to be built in a way how it's proposed. But the good thing is that after all this interest to this project and so on, the buildings stayed not demolished, and the city decided at least to finish the demolition process, and now they are thinking what actually to do with them. And now they are using them as refugee housings, temporary, so at least there is something, maybe not for our office, but for these buildings in this. But after this, or together with this concept, we started to develop this concept further, and my partner, as I said, he lives in Austria and he teaches in Vienna, and they continued this strategy, and they worked also with different historical buildings. This is a work of our students of his students from Vienna, which are using the similar logic to transform these problematic concrete buildings which exist all over Europe, and how to deal with them, how to transform them now, but not for once, but that they continue resilient and transformable structures. So this is the work of some students of ours. And now, to change a bit the scale, I would like to show 3 transformations of 3 little houses which we are doing. In order to transform these houses, we took the idea that actually sometimes you don't need to add many things, that sometimes you can subtract, cut, and therefore get more. And the first project, which actually is now I was just 1 day ago there speaking with the commune about its realization, so it's an ongoing project. It is Geneva Lake, and there is a big, beautiful old house, and then it has the building which is called Dependance, so kind of a little grange, which is attached to the historical building, and it's very beautiful 19th century building. But the problem is it's very long, and the clients, they wanted, now it's completely not serving any purpose. It works almost like a carport, just a canopy for cars, and they wanted to transform it into apartment. But the problem with it was a historical building. You can attach the facades, and it has a very, very long, narrow space and almost no light. So there's one window like this on one side and one window like this on the other side, and this is just a missing part of the wall. So otherwise, it's not working. And what we thought is maybe we could work with it, is we can make a cut, internal cut, which will give us a light in the middle courtyard in order to create 2 living entities, and then the house can start functioning. So what we proposed is to not touch the facades, but to remove part of the roofs without covering them with glass or anything. So there would be on each extremity of the building one kind of balcony, which would give the light to this part of the apartment, and one internal patio. On the ground floor, you would enter through either the courtyard or from the street, appear in a patio, and then you could go up the spiral staircase, and this is this patio which unites and at the same time separates 2 apartments. As I said, it's not glazed, so here's like rain and snow. Is supposed to be here when they come. And on the second floor, you have 2 separate living units, which also their sleeping rooms are having a light from each side. And that allowed us to create this house, and not to make it relatively short, these apartments of normal proportions. This is the vis-a-vis moment of the 2 apartments. Of course, it's a very close living, but at least it's possible. And there was like this little gimmick that in the plan here, before coming to your room, you would have a kind of a room which has like a bathtub, a storage, and your own rooms, and you would not know which door to go, and then you would come, to one of the 2 bedrooms, and finally you will have this historical wall with this kind of elevated patio of the balcony. A similar kind of logic, but a very different house, but of a similar scale. It's another also rural part of Switzerland, Jura Mountains, also French-speaking part, where a beautiful old house, less maybe historical than the previous one, and the barn for animals were owned by the clients, and they wanted to transform it to a big house to be there in summer and winter. And this was the client. And when we observed it, what interested us a lot was this barn for animals, because it was completely, at first it was very beautiful inside, but not serving any purpose. So we thought of maybe the beauty would be, again, referencing the artist Gordon Matta Clark, who you all of course know, at one of his other works about revealing what is inside. And we proposed to create a double kind of house. So this would be kind of the winter house, and this is a summer house, and this is a big terrace where basically the only operation we do here is removing the facade, the old facade, revealing this structure. And in this house, the operation we do is we remove the slab from here and create here a double height room. So here you can see the section. So what used to be several little houses become one big space for gathering, and the right one just reveals this big space which was there. Which was there already. And a simple plan, like is supposed to be in a village. The transformation of an entry, was another part of the barn, and this is the main hall, the interior of the barn, and the little detail about when they leave and they come on top. And the third house, which is probably the quickest one, which will get built, it's almost finished now, is in Vienna, in Austria. It's a much more banal house and much less beautiful than the other 2. And therefore, it's probably easier because it has less problems with the heritage authorities. So it's in the periphery of Vienna, quite a generic villa from 1970s, which the client wants to transform into. It kind of has 2 blocks and it's a bit separated. He wants to transform into one house, and this is the historical drawings of it. And we thought that the house actually doesn't have many problems, but it's not very interconnected. So the strategy of this house was to create several small but strategical openings which can unite you visually and sometimes spatially through this house. So this is the project idea. So it has several openings in the rooftops, similar openings in the interior, in the facade, which allow to create special moments which were important to us, which connect you either from with outside the world, either with another rooms in the connecting enfilades of rooms, or with the terrace, and so on. So this project, these are just some construction photos, uniting also the different levels, and cutting different openings in order to make it a new big house. And I will finish with 2 projects. This is one kind of which gathers several together. So it's a community in the mountains. It's a very it may be a project a bit different from others, but you will see that we try to use the similar strategies. So Chateau Chapiteau it's a nomadic community in the mountains. It was actually quite funny how it's located in Georgia, and in Georgia it's quite far away from the main city, Tbilisi, so it's really in the mountains, a bit in the middle of nowhere. And our clients is a kind of a community of fun people. The main one is a businessman who decided to make a downshifting and to sell everything to buy property in Georgia. They crowdfunded this place, and they started to live there. And so they have a very minimal resources. They try to make kind of agriturismo there. They try to live there, they live there. But at the same time, So our question was how to shelter this community with the minimum resources, but keep it maximum fun and maximum relaxed. And all the money that they're doing for construction is crowdfunded. So basically they invite other people to go there to buy shares in their projects, and then they build with it. And the second thing is that it's all auto-constructed, so the community itself is building it. So the first strategy was to create a series of primitive huts for them, and we looked at the traditional kind of vernacular buildings of primitive huts and proposed to them a series of strategies of little houses. Some of them are built, some of them are going to be built, and some of them couldn't be built because of the technological reasons. And they were all, like they have a beautiful river with a forest, and they were all, we made the master plan for them, showing how different typologies can create different atmospheres there. And the first one realized after a series of attempts was a tin can castle, what we call. It's a shelter for 6,000 euros altogether, including the fact that they worked on it themselves. So the space, it's very beautiful. This is my partner Artyom there posing with the main guy. They're a bit, Chateau Chapiteau is kind of their play on words. As you know, Chateau is a castle and Chapiteau is a circus. So they try to play on this kind of balance between, it's half a circus, half a serious estate. And that's the whole vibe of this place. But when you look at the local materials, so this is some agricultural barns next to it. The most, in this beautiful place, the most typical and the most cheap affordable material is this corrugated metal. And also we started to look, as you see, we often try to look at the materials now available at the place. And the other one was, for instance, that they use quite some often the old car tires in order to make foundations. We looked at some other kind of vernacular things, went to the markets, and basically, because the first project which we did for them was not be able to be built for purely technical reasons, so we decided to go there for this and really choose the materials and understand what they can. So they were choosing all these materials, and then finally we created a kind of a very simple structure which could be built by themselves. So here, as you see, the kind of the whole community came to build these little houses, including kids and cooks. And back then, we made these little shelters. There are several of them now in the forest, using this local material and also trying to be quite in harmony with nature. And one little detail, also speaking about, let's say, the way how we work with material, is that they had only the most, let's say, banal plastic windows, and we thought of using one of them, but putting it 45 degrees in order to create this little moment of something special, but using the most available and the cheapest thing on the market. Here you can see, this is, you see the inside, and the second one was even a simpler idea. Was it's also another typology of these little houses for them, which we called fairy tale tents. And we looked at both fairy tales, but because that's what they are, but also something very pragmatical. Like this is a Napoleon's temporary kind of tent. And we proposed to make very simple metallic structures, and then to use the only, let's say, luxury that we have is the use of color. And we have created a series of textiles which would cover these very diverse tents in this forest, and will create kind of a basic shelter for them, which were working as lanterns in the night. And the last project for them was the only kind of public space they have for the moment, was called the Temple Barn. They asked us that they need a workshop and they need a place together. And at the moment when we were already working, we just started thinking, they bought this agricultural barn and built it there. And then even by the time when we think even longer, they already started to cover it with this ugly corrugated metal of the dark brown color. So when we started working, we already had this. So it was a bit, let's say, transformation of a completely new building. So, and we started to think, what can we actually do with it? How can we finish and how we can transform it into something meaningful? And the more we looked at it, the more we saw the kind of the resemblance to a typical basilica. And as you know, in basilicas also, these facades, they are standing in front of usually a brick structure, at least in Italy. So there is a moment of representation and there is a moment of pure logic like a warehouse. And then, like the first little thing which we did, we made these internal lights. And then, as we said, they have a really minimum resources. So sometimes we call this project, how much can you do with a barrel, not a barrel, like a bucket of white paint. So we propose to keep the original dark brown, orange color, but to paint it, because it also has quite a nice effect if you just paint it straight on the corrugated metal. And we created the pattern, and again, the whole community has painted it. And we made some little details, like we created to store the things outside these little wings, these circles, but all the rest is done purely by pattern. We also referred to this Tom Sawyer story, when the guy was supposed to paint the fence, but then he gathered all the people around him, and it created kind of a common action of painting this thing. And then inside it serves as a warehouse, this is the whole community, and my father's with his family. And it works as a wood workshop, as a place they're doing many manual things, as a place to grill, to celebrate, and to make birthdays and parties. And that's how it looks in the winter, which was also quite a nice surprise. And the last project for today is a bit speaking about a bit more serious types of technology and a bit more, let's say, more complex typology. It's Zug Crea Towers. It's a tower. It's a competition which we've done in collaboration with Jan de Wilder and Inge Wink, Belgian architects, good friends of ours. Invited competition. Unfortunately, we didn't win it, but we are quite happy with the result and with the lessons which we learned from this project. So the location of this project is Zug. It's an extremely rich and contemporary city, quite a small city in Switzerland. It's known for the fact that there's lots of new technology. All the startups and big companies have their location there. And they are also very contemporary in terms of taxes. So it's a highly technological city. And as you see there, for a city of 30,000 inhabitants, they have world-class architecture of like Valerio Algiati and other famous architects. They have many towers, and they have a new tech cluster where the new project was supposed to be done. And then it was supposed to be an office tower. And right after the COVID and right after the transformation to the home office, we started to ask ourselves, is it really another tower, another office tower, when now everyone speaks about the kind of home office, and it's obviously that office typology is under crisis. Should we really do another tower, or should we do maybe a tower which can be something different in future? And this was the volumetry, and this is the final model. So you can see it's a pretty rigid and pretty basic architectural form. So therefore, we again started to think about the materials, but a bit like in the Georgian example in Logroño, but on a different scale, on a different level. And in, let's say, Swiss level and this level of Swiss Polytechnical University, which is highly technological. So this professor, this is an architect, Professor Philip Bloch. He's very famous for his, if you don't know, and I'm speaking out students, check out his work, highly technological. He works a lot with vaults, and he has created a company which is called Rippmann Floor Slab, foreign engineers. It's a very smart concrete solution which uses the logic of all the, let's say, Gothical cathedrals, where they use concrete slabs, but these concrete slabs, due to the very complex series of ribs, they can save a lot of materials. So basically these floor slabs, and this is a kind of a simplified version which we were using, they save up to 40% of concrete, and they're actually, if you calculate the CO2 emissions, they're more ecological than building out of wood. So what we have created was a building which was, and the beauty of this strategy is that these are 4 cornerstones with 1 keystone, and theoretically this keystone can be replaced by a core, by a toilet, or even by, there can be removed and without affecting the structure. So together also with ZPF engineers, we have created a system of fully disassemblable hybrid between wooden vertical structures, Rippmann floor slabs, which can theoretically be disassembled, and this was the base for the building. And the idea that not only you can change the building, but you can also remove the slabs without losing the structural integrity. There was also created this kind of locks moments. And from outside, the building looked pretty standard, and we tried to be pretty modest. But one thing you can see is that due to this, we have created a series of we call them pockets or niches, which allowed us to remove some places and to show the possibility of creating double height spaces. And this was our mistake, so maybe don't do it anymore. We decided also to play with the position of the cores of the vertical circulation, and I guess that was one of the reasons why we lost, because it was maybe too ambitious and not too clear to the jury. But I think the general concept of disassembling the building was pretty convincing still. Yeah, and here you can see these different volumes which can create. And here on the section you see the possibility of these double height spaces which migrate through the buildings, created these moments of public gathering on different levels. Thank you.
Tenemos tiempo si queréis hacer alguna pregunta.
Y sí, como yo he dicho antes, puedes preguntar en castellano y yo puedo responder si tienes vergüenza de hablar en inglés.
Hello here. Thank you very much. Maybe referring more to housing, maybe seeing the last project can also be an office. But I'm thinking about if permanent housing is turning into more temporary, in a way, long-term temporary, talking about circular economy, flexible spaces, disassembly. But at the same time, on the other hand, temporary housing is turning more into permanent housing, talking about, for example, after 2023 earthquake in Turkey, people living in temporary housing for more than a year, or refugees living for more than 3 years. So what's now temporary and what is permanent? And do you think we are going to a midpoint between both?
I mean, I think this is the main question, and that's the main thing which we noticed because we realized that actually any building, it doesn't matter how you call it, any building is both those, and that's why we called the lecture like this. We start to realize this paradox more and more. So sometimes you build with a huge ambition for Olympic Games, building tons of stuff from concrete, and it serves one season and then it's abandoned. And sometimes people, as you say, they live in like basically some refugee camps which become slums due to legal reasons. They live there for decades, and they transform into already permanent solutions. So I think this kind of division is something maybe that we have to rethink when we are working. And basically this is kind of very conventional division, this is forever, this is temporary, because sometimes, let's say, if you release yourself from this framework, you can be much more creative. And not only creative, but you can much better solve the current issues. So, I don't know, there's, for instance, in this book, Jan de Wilder, he speaks about a parking garage in Zurich, which is supported by like 1,000 yellow props. So basically, it seems like the garage was falling, and they decided to put 1,000 yellow props, but like really like an engineer, he just chose 10 places. It looks both like an art piece, but also it looks like a properly working architecture. And they think that this kind of permanent architecture was solved by what's called, like, you know, this puntelli, I don't know how to say in Spanish, puntales, right? So basically the whole building is standing there thanks to puntales. It's a beautiful building thanks to puntales. And again, this kind of mix, like, and this kind of concrete, which was casted probably by some well-known concrete firm, is not performing. So I think this is a very relevant question. And of course, I think if you think designing of a temporary like shelter, you should also think about that it may become someone's home forever, you know. And there's nothing more permanent than temporary. Also in this book, there is a case of a wall. It was in Moscow during the reconstruction, they have put in the most historical part of the city, imagine like here in next to Plaza de Sol, for instance, around the construction site, a 700-meter long metal wall, which was, I think, 17 meters high. 700 by 17, so it was really like, and it stood there for 7 years, really like in the most patrimonial place, and no one noticed it because it was marked, this is temporary. So no one even questioned the fact that it was really like, if it was a house like 10 times smaller, of course it would create different questions of the patrimony, of the heritage and so on. So I think this kind of is a very interesting question, and the more and more I work, the more it interests me as well.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. It's so amazing, all the projects. I would like to ask you, how is your approach in regards to maintenance or the life cycle of the projects? Because this new way of construction where there's like many layers of permanence, and which is like super ecological, the fact that you can not disregard all the structure, but only like the parts that get old as the building ages, for example, allows for like this really interesting architecture. But I'm really interested in what would be, or what it is your approach in regards to the inhabitants of those buildings, in terms of like this way of making architecture translates into like, I think there's like a need from within the community to have like some degree of technical knowledge or the need for new architects that take those projects and evolve them afterwards. So yeah, I'm like interested in what's your approach in terms of like giving guidelines for that possibility of disassembly, or just like leaving the project and allowing like new agents to take part in it.
Yeah, first I think it's, you said this new type of architecture, but actually there is a funny diagram, I can show you later. It says a temporary loss of common sense. It shows like a same icon of an old building. Let's say it has a crack, then it's repaired, and it says, I don't know, 1500, 1600, 1700, and always is the same. Building has a crack, repaired, building has a crack, repaired, building has a crack, repaired. Then suddenly, after the Industrial Revolution, the 20th century, it's the same building, but then it's demolished, and then it shows again today, and it says like this was a temporary loss of, maybe it had to do, not maybe, I guess it had to do with the economy, with the industrialization, with maybe a lot of oil money and the absence of the kind of resource scarcity discourse, but now it's basically coming back to the way how buildings were constructed before. So the idea of reuse is super old. The spolia, you can find them in ancient Rome and in Greece. This is just one point. And the second thing is that I don't think that this type of, let's say, this concept of having more permanent and more temporary parts of the building is given to the people who live there. It's not like the idea of a squat, although the ideas of squat, they preceded, no? You come, like people come to some abandoned building, which is very sturdy, and just try to occupy it themselves. I think that's what basically we're saying, that this should become just the logic of normal planners, architects, and we should think about it. We should just, how to say, we just need to ask ourselves how long will this thing last, and what is the kind of the time span which we should give it to it. And therefore, there's some things that you need to constantly repair. For instance, there's a problem of windows of certain materials which cannot just last forever, and they have to be thrown in the garbage theoretically. But if you design them differently, if you design them in a way that they can be repaired, or they can be, let's say, certain parts can be repaired, it makes it much more, let's say, ecological. But I don't think it is a question that skyscrapers or big developments will be then maintained by some skilled workers. I think it's a utopia. I think it's the architectural technology should evolve, and I think it's already evolving. It's just that if you use, I don't know, lots of plastic, lots of glue, and lots of kind of wet technology, you will not be able to repair it. If you think about how to make joints in a way that you can disassemble and just repair a small part, it's completely possible. And I think it also, of course, has to do with the price of work, because if you imagine a reparation of a little part of the window with a skilled worker in Spain or in Switzerland, let's say, can theoretically cost more than a new window which is shipped from China. And then if you compare these things, this becomes quite clear that you cannot solve it. Like even if you want it, you just don't have money to do this. So I think it's not a question of a person, you know. Like, I mean, we're discussing one little window where you just need like one little stick, and this stick should be repaired. But because this is a work of already not even a carpenter, it's a work already of restorator, and restorator is a higher level of, let's say, professionality. They are busy with monuments, churches, and so on. So you have to be extremely rich to repair your bathroom window with a restorator, or you should be crazy. And therefore, you just throw this window, and maybe you throw 90% of a working window for a little piece, which is just the economy didn't allow you. So I think it's, of course, technological questions. And that's why I think in the last projects, I don't know, maybe it's yet not there. Maybe it's not a perfect solution. I'm sure there are architects who do it better and more technologically smart. But that's how we try to approach this, already on a kind of highly technological level, to work with real engineers, with real companies which produce these things, and not just dream like, oh, buildings should transform themselves and so on. That's why I wanted to end with this last project. Even though it's, I think there's still much more to be, how to say, developed and so on. But at least this approach, that from just an idea of it, we start to actually speak to specialists, and I think most of them understand, and I think this is how this will be changed, and not by some kind of utopian idea that there will be some people who have, I don't know, lots of free work, and they will after work transform our buildings like fairies, you know. So I think we should think, and especially in a polytechnical school, I don't think it should be kind of belief in the, I think we can get inspiration from, let's say, a squad where everything is done by motivated young people with lots of free time, but then transform it to architectural logic and to speak about it with engineers and propose, like, actually work in solutions to make it happen.
Thank you. And so the role of the architect, you don't see like an evolution in terms of the role of the architect while developing like this type of architecture?
I mean, I think there is a definitely, how to say, there's definitely, at least in my perception, there's definitely a shift of the role. It doesn't mean that all architects think like this. But for instance, I cannot say yet the project because it's a competition, but I can say very vaguely, we are now doing a competition which we are a bit breaking the brief, but we are proposing or allowing us, first time actually maybe in our practice, to do what I say about this, that architect shouldn't be always chief builder, but can be chief curator of space. So what we propose, we are asked to build a certain volume. And we know, we looked at the existing buildings around, we know the city very well, and we know that one building will be evacuated and will be standing idle, an office tower which also belongs to the same client. So what we propose in not building this full building, but reusing partially another building. So, and I mean, we will either completely lose, or we will, so it's kind of a win, like it doesn't matter what is the color of the facade or which rooms we drew, it's really kind of this yes or no. But if we would win, it's also because of this, that we propose something that rethinking the brief in such a radical way, that proposing, allowing ourselves not to only design a tower, but also allowing us to maybe propose to a client to do something else. And I think with the competition, it's probably going to fail, but if it was a real client with whom you develop a relationship, you can actually convince him, and you can sit with even a calculator and calculate the money which he will save, and convince him to, let's say, if he wants a certain volume and you think it's better to do, to say, let's do another building and so on. So I think this is happening, and I think it has to do with, of course, the amount of built structures which we have already, and we constantly need new ones because the society constantly changes, and there is lots of the ones which are, let's say, outdated. And if we think about how these two, the need of doing something new and somewhere else, a lacune or like an absence can be combined, I think that could be very, very, very nice. And what I also noticed that sometimes working with the existing structures there, you kind of come up with the solutions which are nicer that you would propose even if you would be very talented artist and design something from your head, purely formal. Because kind of they give you surprise and you suddenly rediscovering something is maybe sometimes more interesting than just to draw from scratch.
Thank you very much.
¿Hay alguna otra pregunta?
Okay, I think is.
I also say thank you very much, and thanks for inviting, thanks for being here, thanks for your questions, and thanks for a great atmosphere which I felt in the school, at least amongst the teachers with whom I had the chance to speak.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.